Well, let's head then from the farmyard at West Point to the wildlife haven now of the Exe Estuary. And wardens there are asking people to give the wetland birds space to rest and feed at 2 wildlife refuges in the area.
Run by neighbouring local councils, the Wildlife Refuges scheme was launched in 2017 to help protect resident and visiting birds this autumn. Our reporter Claire Manning went out on the water with the wildlife wardens.
Twice a week, Wildlife Warden Caius, who's piloting the patrol boat today, and his colleague Imogen, who's nearby on this smaller tender, take to the River Exe to make sure people aren't going into the nearby wildlife reserves and disturbing bird life.
So when the birds arrive here, they have depleted their fat reserves because they've travelled thousands of miles to get here. And so these birds are really on the brink. They need to rest, and they need to rest undisturbed.
Here on the Exe, there are 2 wildlife reserves, one at Dawlish Warren, where people are asked to keep away from certain areas all year round, and Exmouth Wildlife Range, where people are only asked not to visit between September and the end of December. Imogen's job is to have a presence on these nature reserves and explain to people why they shouldn't be here. Well, as you can see, while we're out on the boat filming with Imogen, she's found 2 kayaks that have landed where they shouldn't have on Dawlish Warren. She's out on the tender. She's looking for the owners of those kayaks, just have a quiet word with them to explain to them why really they shouldn't be here. These are voluntary refuges, meaning legally Imogen can't force anyone not to visit. But by explaining to people the harm they cause, she tells me most people do listen. Imogen, we just saw you approach those 2 kayakers to explain to them that they'd landed somewhere they shouldn't. How did it go?
Yeah, it went pretty well. We just had a conversation and just explained that the birds do feed on that beach, and we just need to give them space this time of year.
That conversation went well, they listened. I imagine your job is tricky sometimes though. You're talking to people who perhaps don't want to listen.
Yeah, the job definitely does have its challenges, but on the most part people are really open-minded and happy to listen.
Among the birds that need protecting are these Brent geese. Now, I'm no bird watcher, so I'll explain this in layman's terms. These geese are quite simply exhausted. They've flown here from Siberia and feed on eelgrass, but any disturbance from a paddleboarder, a dog, or even a shadow from the sail of a boat can spook them, meaning they don't recuperate, ready for breeding and their long flight back to Siberia. But despite this scheme being only voluntary, monitoring reports show this gentle approach is working.
It's fabulous that we can get voluntary groups and users of the estuary to follow this code without any regulations or fines or anything.
While thousands of people simply enjoy visiting this area, tens of thousands of wetland birds need this area. So it's up to us to learn how to share it. Claire Manning, ITV News on the River Exe.
Oh, beautiful but chilly day on the River Exe there. And just upstream from there is the RSPB hide at Bowling Green. That's where Charlie is live for us this evening. Charlie, this is an ideal place to see much more wildlife at this time of year, isn't it?
It's almost the perfect time of year, really, and it has been a gorgeous day, much like yesterday in terms of all that blue sky and decent temperatures, so it just makes it all the more better, really, particularly with views like this. But joining me now is Brian, who's a volunteer here. Brian, what makes it sort of so special here in terms of a reserve for all these birds?
Well, we're coming up to a great time of the year, really. It's changed over time. So swallows, they're on the way back to Africa. We've already lost the swifts. Just the other day we waved goodbye to ospreys. 2 ospreys were here, and they were here for about 2 or 3 weeks feeding up for the big long journey. But in their place, we're going to have Brent geese are going to come down. In fact, we saw a couple the other day just further along the estuary, and they come here for the forest of eelgrass that we find on this river. We'll have curlews, avocets, black-tailed godwits, snipe, all sorts of waders, and they come for the invertebrates that can be found in the mud.
It's all to do with food, like a big feeding station here, isn't it? And it all depending on how the different weather conditions are across the rest of Europe, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, in some ways we want it to get colder because then we get even more birds, and that's what we want.
And if people haven't got access to a place like this, what kind of things can they do at home, in their gardens, wherever they live, to sort of help those birds during the next couple of months?
Well, some people now feed birds throughout the year, which is fine. Just increase the feeding. Just remember to keep the feeders clean. Hygiene is really important. Put out wire worms on trays and things. Scatter it about a bit more, and then the birds don't congregate too much together.
That's perfect, thank you. It's just been a joy here as well. It's good for the soul to have a little bit of wildlife. Thank you so much. Let's see if this weather will continue.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Westcountry Weather.
Well, it's certainly been a fine day today, hasn't it? It's going to be, again, pretty dry as we head through tonight, but not quite as chilly. Tomorrow, a few more showers creeping in, and then altogether a bit wetter and windier as we head through Thursday. So a change to something a little bit more autumnal, a bit more seasonal, dare I say it. The Atlantic shows the big picture, as always. Big area of high pressure at the moment across a good chunk of the UK, but that gets squeezed out of the way by a weak front, admittedly, during the course of tomorrow. And then on Thursday, a spell of more persistent rain, some slightly stronger wind starts to work its way in from the south and the west. But for the rest of this evening, it's going to be a pretty gorgeous one, really. Still a lot of clear sky around, but we'll see a bit more cloud as we head through the course of tonight. Slightly stronger winds, so all in all, it won't be quite as chilly as it was last night. We had a frost. Tonight, I think temperature will drop down to maybe 5 or 6 Celsius, something along those lines. So still chilly, but not quite as cold. And there'll be a good deal of fine weather as we head through the course of Wednesday as well. For a good few hours of the morning, not as much blue sky around, a bit more cloud. But as we head towards midday, I think we'll start to see outbreaks of rain working their way through as this front arrives. So a bit more cloud around, maybe some low cloud and some more frequent outbreaks of rain and some brisk winds. But temperatures will still get up to about 15 or 16 degrees. It won't feel all that warm, though, trapped underneath a bit more cloud, I don't think. High tide as we head through the course tomorrow between around sort of 6 and 9 in the morning, and again during this first chunk of the evening. Thursday, a different day, cloudier, wetter, more persistent rain, stronger winds, much more autumnal, but it's replaced by something a bit more showery as we head through Friday into the start of the weekend. So not a complete washout, but certainly something more autumnal, not too far away.
Valent sponsors ITV Westcountry Weather.
All right, Charlie, another lovely